So we have Glenn Greenwald joining us now. Hi, Glenn.
Hey, Glenn, how are you?
I'm very good. Thank you so much for joining. I don't even know where to begin. I guess I want to start with Taylor Lorenz and the Washington Post exposing the person behind the libs of TikTok. And I'd love to hear your opinion. Mine is that I just think this has nothing to do with anything other than that particular thread was popular, and the libs of TikTok was making
conservative.
It right, and conservative. So it's got to be shut down.
Exactly. You know, this is my view on it is, if you want to have some kind of journalistic debate in the abstract about whether it's newsworthy once a person accumulates a certain level of influence on social media and begins to do things like appear anonymously on cable shows like she has on Fox, that it's somehow journalistically justifiable to tell the public who this person is who's become so influential. I wouldn't agree with that. I don't think that's a proper way, especially for corporate giants, media giants like the Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos, to be spending their time unmasking private citizens. But if you wanted to argue that you can fit that within the definition of newsworthiness, that's something I could swallow, even though I wouldn't agree with it, if it were going to really be applied consistently, meaning that today I could go and find out the real life identity of some popular trans woman who has a big follower count on Facebook and expose her, even though she claims that her anonymity is necessary for her safety. Or maybe tomorrow Fox could send a camera crew to the homes of Taylor Lorenz's parents and siblings in order to ask questions about her the way she did to the family members of this private person behind this Twitter account. But of course, that would never be permissible. If any of that happened, the media would have a complete meltdown. They would declare some sort of national day of mourning if anyone did that to Taylor Lorenz or a Black Lives Matter activist or a trans person on social media. This is nothing more than an attempt to punish private citizens for having the wrong political ideology under the guise of journalism. So this whole abstract debate about what is newsworthy, it's just a fraud. It's a pretext to cover for the fact that this is a political operation designed to punish somebody for making their voice heard with views that the media dislike.
Is this any different than the Twitter story with Elon Musk?
I think in a lot of ways there are similarities in that one of the things that has happened is the censorship regime that has grown so quickly on these Silicon Valley monopolistic platforms like Facebook and Google and Twitter. I think people have forgotten that the real test case, the first time it was really done, was only 3 years ago in 2018 or 2019, when these corporations united and decided they were going to ban Alex Jones and Milo Yiannopoulos from the internet and deperson them all at once. And, most people cheered because most people don't like those two figures, and they ignored the precedent. And we tried to warn them that this precedent was going to create a censorship regime. And I think what has happened is the censorship regime has become a very powerful tool in the hands of the corporate media because it lets them silence dissidents to their orthodoxies and people who compete with them, who develop a large audience. Liberals of TikTok has a larger audience than a lot of media people do. She's more popular, she's more influential, and they want to silence her. So I think that's one big benefit. But the other big benefit of it is it's become a really valuable way of propagandizing the public. I don't know if you saw, I reported on it yesterday, a bunch of former intelligence and national security officials issued a letter denouncing attempts in Congress to rein in the monopolistic power of big tech by saying it's important that big tech have this power centralized in their hands to censor the internet because that's how we advance U.S. national security interests. And a lot of power centers see this as an important tool to enforce liberal orthodoxy and to be able to punish and silence and censor and banish any dissidents from it.
Let me switch again. I could talk to you just about everything. You're so plugged in. I don't know if you saw the story, I'm sure you did, about the CIA tracking Trump phones And this seemingly goes all the way back to 2014. It's my understanding CIA cannot do that inside of America. Does anybody care?
I don't think they do, because the reality is that the contrived and fraudulent scandal that dominated U.S. politics for 5 years, basically during the entire Trump presidency and during the campaign, which is Russiagate, was cooked up by the CIA. They're the ones who manufactured that entire false political scandal as a way of undermining and subverting a president that they disliked, but who had nonetheless been elected to be elected by the American people. And before the 2020 election, when they were so desperate to ensure Trump wasn't reelected, they did the same thing. The completely false and fraudulent claim that the Hunter Biden laptop and emails that reflected Joe Biden's business activities in China and Russia were Russian disinformation, despite being a complete lie, was used by big tech to censor that reporting right before the election, was used by the media to discredit it. And that also came from the intelligence community. You know, many of the same intelligence officials I just said signed that letter for big tech were the ones who signed the letter lying that this was Russian disinformation. For me, this is, Glenn, the most important and the most undercovered story of the last 5 or 6 years is the increasing use of whatever you want to call it, you know, the security state, the deep state, the CIA-led blob, that increasingly their attention is not directed to foreign countries or adversaries or even foreign populations, which by charter is where they're required to operate, but instead is being the dark arts of these agencies are being used inward, domestically, to manipulate U.S. public opinion and U.S. elections. And I hardly can think of anything more dangerous than this permanent unelected power faction in Washington now taking a major role in trying to dictate how the American public thinks and how they vote and the outcome of elections.
So some of the reaction to some of these things, for instance, the Lorenz and the Twitter, insanity over Elon Musk, says to me that they are afraid, really afraid, and people are starting to wake up. Are we starting to turn a corner, or is that wishful thinking? Where are we?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, because if you look at every metric, there is no doubt that public faith and trust in mainstream large media corporations is at their lowest level ever. Nobody watches cable news because they don't find any value in it. They don't trust the hosts, with one exception, which is Fox. It still has an okay audience, but CNN and MSNBC are completely dying. All these new heralded liberal digital outlets, BuzzFeed and Huffington Post and Vice and all of those are completely collapsing. I mean, they're disintegrating rapidly. They probably won't exist anymore. There's kind of like a complete consolidation where only the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal actually command an audience. So they know that the public has completely turned against them. And then at the same time, what you see is the rise of independent media. There was a time, and I would say just a short time ago, that the most influential voice in the United States in the media was yourself, looking at your audience and the influence that you had. And you still do have a lot of that. I would say now the most influential media person is someone who is completely disconnected from any media corporation or from even the discourse that they produce, which is Joe Rogan. If you look at the sites that are growing as opposed to collapsing, the way mainstream media outlets are, it's all of the independent sites that promise free speech, that promise heterodox views. And of course, the people who work inside media corporations are looking at this and they're petrified and they want to keep hold of the only things they still have, which for the moment are the ability to censor the internet using big tech platforms. So when Elon Musk comes and says, I want to overturn the censorship regime and reinstate a framework of free speech, of course they panic. That's one of the few weapons they have left to preserve the little power that they have, and also the ability to banish their competitors, people in independent media, is also something they're really desperate to keep as well. And it does make me optimistic, but at the same time, power centers don't lose power without a huge fight.
Right.
And even though Elon Musk is, the most powerful or the richest man in the world, if he really were serious about buying Twitter and were really serious about allowing free speech, inviting Trump back on the platform, allowing views that are now banned to be heard, I think he would be in for a kind of a fight from the media, from the intelligence community, from the government, unlike anything he's ever seen.
Oh, I agree. And I will tell you that I think we're dealing with people that kind of had the attitude, if I can't have it, no one will.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much bitterness and professional jealousy. A columnist at Substack who's an independent writer, he's a super interesting guy, mostly on the left, but very independent-minded, Freddie DeBoer, wrote an article about 6 months ago basically saying that the reason these people in the media are so vindictive and they love to destroy people's lives, like you just saw Taylor Lorenz do by unmasking this woman to the applause of most of her colleagues, is because they actually have a very miserable existence. They work for gigantic media conglomerates. These media conglomerates are not doing well. Nobody is consuming their product, which means the pay is bad, the work conditions are bad. They're required to turn out 8 and 10 kind of trivial, superficial articles, a day or 20 a week just to keep the content mill grinding. They're reaching middle age. They have no job security. No one trusts them. No one likes them. The work is unfulfilling. That's why they're so angry. And I think a lot of it is exactly what you said, that if you find success outside of their constraints, their corporate constraints, they despise you. That's why they're so happy to see Julian Assange being imprisoned for his journalism, even though he's broken more major stories than anyone, because he's not part of their club. And if you succeed like Joe Rogan has or anyone else, you become their target, because that's the only thing they have left is that anger and rage about how the public is turned against them.
There was a Twitter story out from Jared Rabel. He said, I boarded a plane today with my son, and mid-flight, the pilot announces that the mask mandate is over. Flight attendants pulled off their masks, sneezed directly into their hands while screaming, "This is MAGA airspace." My son turned to me in tears and said, I don't know what to do. Then, after posting that, he got messaged from the New York Times, a journalist, that said, I'd like to talk to you over the phone about what happened on your flight this evening. Can you please give me a call at this number or let me know how I can reach you? Hope this isn't coming too late for your day. Thank you. They didn't know that it was a joke.
Imagine how completely detached you have to be from just basic American conservatives or just ordinary people who aren't affluent liberals who live on the coast to believe a story like that, conservatives are so vindictive that they would not only celebrate the elimination of masks, which is a very reasonable thing to do, but then start purposely sneezing into their hands to try and transmit virus and declare how much of a caricature must you have in your head about half the country in order to believe that? The satire was, extreme. It was designed to be immediately recognizable, and yet a New York Times reporter believes it because that's what she believes about conservatives. And so this gigantic breach we have between the elite, affluent, liberal, coastal elites and the entire rest of the country, at least in my lifetime, has never been wider. And it's one of the main reasons why no one trusts them, because they live in a different world and speak a different language, and their lives are completely removed from most people's experiences.